to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business forum bringing timely economic discussion to the region for 35 years. Presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to our 2019-2020 sponsors and partners. Presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. Cooperating sponsors, First Light, WEX, and Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Community Corner sponsor, Goral Palmer. Parking sponsor, CV and Mahar Engineers. Reception sponsors, Clark Insurance, KeyBank, and Veril. Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs sponsors, Springborn Staffing Center and AAA Northern New England. Media partners, News Radio WGAN, The Forecaster, WMTW News 8, Maine Biz, with production support provided by Headlight. And thank you to our 2019-20 special community partners, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, the University of Southern Maine, and Southern Maine Community College. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber President, Jim Cohen.
Good morning, and welcome to our final virtual Eggs and Issues of the season. My name is Jim Cohen, and once again, I'm coming to you live from the Portland Chamber's Eggs and Issues studios in my living room, situated in the lovely North Deering neighborhood of Portland. I'm a partner with the Veril Law Firm, and I'm honored to serve as the volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. I want to thank all of you once again for safely joining us this month for Eggs and Issues. For years, we have been able to enjoy each other's company, make meaningful connections, and share a hearty breakfast at the Holiday Inn by the Bay in downtown Portland. Our hope, for many reasons, is that we will once again be able to return to those days. But in the interim, we appreciate the opportunity to provide our members with online virtual programming, such as Eggs and Issues, so that you can remain connected while simultaneously eating breakfast in your jammies from the comfort of your own home. Today's topic, Reinventing Business During COVID-19, features CEOs from three of Maine's most recognizable companies, Kevin Hancock of Hancock Lumber, Don Oakes of Seabags, and Josh Broder of Tilson. Each panelist will provide insights as to how they reinvented their organizations in the new COVID-19 economy, from pivoting their production to remodeling distribution to managing remote employees. Before we begin today's presentation, I do want to take a moment again to thank all of our sponsors for Eggs and Issues, who make this event possible every month, whether in person or virtual. First and foremost, our primary event sponsors, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. I also want to thank our other sponsors, First Light, WEX, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, Clark Insurance, KeyBank, Veril, AAA Northern New England, Springborn Staffing, and Goral Palmer. A special thank you to our media partners, The Forecaster, WGAN, WMTW, Maine CW, and Maine Biz, and our FMI sponsor, the Portland Public Library. We miss our friends at Headlight Audiovisual and hope to be back in person soon and working with them once again. And a very special thank you to our special community partners who support all of our chamber initiatives: Anthem, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, University of Southern Maine, Southern Maine Community College, and our newest special community sponsor, MEMIC. A virtual round of applause for all of our amazing sponsors. I also want to thank our CEO, Quincy Hensel, and all the staff of the Chamber who have been working harder than ever to support our members as we navigate this public health crisis. I was also very proud of the Chamber's public statement last week in opposition to systemic racial inequality and in support of the right to peaceful protest. These are difficult issues for our community to confront, yet confront them we must. The Chamber has embraced diversity and equality for all as core values, including our support for adult education in the City of Portland's Office of Economic Opportunity. We look forward to continued efforts to make our community a better place, regardless of race, ethnicity, or any other characteristic that defines us as individuals. Now on to the program. We begin today's program with Kevin Hancock, who will describe how Hancock Lumber transformed their stores across the state to safely conduct business and protect the well-being of their employees and customers. Following Kevin will be Don Oakes, who will share how Seabags navigated through multi-state reopening regulations and their conversion to a so-called essential business by producing masks. Rounding out our panel is Joshua Broder, who will discuss the importance of communications among the staff of Tilson throughout the country. And he will also talk about the lasting impact that COVID-19 has on Tilson's future outlook. We will then move to Q&A. As with prior Eggs and Issues, we encourage questions from the audience. If you want to ask a question, you can submit it at any time during the presentation through the chat function on your YouTube screen. But to do so, you will first need to log into your Google or YouTube account. With that, we would like to start the program with our first presenter of the morning, Kevin Hancock. Welcome, Kevin.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to start by saying thank you to the Chamber for the excellent work that you do for all of us here in the greater Portland area and Southern Maine generally. I also want to say it's a pleasure to be on with Don and Josh, two great people and two great companies. And you're going to see before the show's over that they both have backgrounds that are far better than mine. I lose in that category this morning. And that's partly because I'm actually at the Marriott Courtyard in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I thought a bit about whether or not I was going to share this morning, and I think it's actually an important part of the story. I was gonna talk to you from my room, but I couldn't find a shot that didn't include the bed, and I finally talked them into letting me into the conference room, which is where I am. But I was speaking with the woman who opened the conference room, and I simply asked her, "How's business?" And she said, "Well, we're really busy again. We've been almost full for a few weeks now." And I thought that was quite interesting. I'm coming back from a quick trip to Florida that I needed to make, but I was also quite interested in just seeing another community's approach to responding to the virus. I was down in Naples in Southwest Florida, and Naples is essentially fully open. The restaurants are open, the hotels are open, the bars are open, and they're all quite busy. A lot of people who would normally be up north in New England or in the Midwest have stayed there, in part because Florida is quite open right now. And I was curious as to what it would feel like. And to me, it felt really, really safe. I've just had this perception from the beginning that people understand individually how to stay spaced and stay clean and stay calm and stay smart. So it was interesting to see what was happening in Florida. And then tomorrow on my way through Maine, I am going to stop at Intermed and get tested and confirm that I'm still healthy and good to go. But that kind of brings me to what I was thinking about in terms of this subject. You know, how has the virus impacted our company? We've been quite lucky. The virus itself has not impacted our company. We have 550 employees, and none of them have contracted the virus. And to my knowledge, none of their family members have. And to my knowledge, none of our customers have. So we've been fortunate that way. The real issue or challenge has been adjusting to our communal response to the virus. And I think that really is the big question at hand, is what's the right response? And it's such a delicate issue because we don't want to undershoot the response, but ideally we wouldn't want to overshoot the response either. So it's trying to figure out what's just right that is tricky. So anyway, going back to our experience, we have 14 locations across Maine. They're manufacturing and retail sites. On March 4th, I was in New York City thinking nothing about the virus. And on March 5th, the NBA started canceling games and everything changed in a hurry. And I was thinking back to what we dealt with in March, and the first issue really was, can we legally stay open? You know, nobody knew how we were going to handle this. And that was, and the big challenge for us was that to stay open, we were going to have to do it on site. We have not figured out how to manufacture lumber from our couch and pajamas, that you have to actually be there to do it. So we were either going to go to work or we weren't going to work. And it turned out we were quote unquote essential business, so we could stay open. But then we hit the big pivot point, which was this. I had no interest in making our people work. I had no interest in making anybody work. So we then went out and engaged our employees in a discussion process about what they wanted to do, what they felt comfortable with. And it was quite inspiring in total, because essentially everybody wanted to work. But taking that extra step to allow the employees to really choose their path had a really big impact, I think, on what we did next, because the people on our teams were really owning the responsibility for making this work together and safely. Thinking about how that went, in reflection, it's all worked out fine and it wasn't that complicated. We put a big emphasis on cleaning. We put a big emphasis on spacing. We re-engineered all of our manufacturing processes so that everybody was at least 6 feet apart. And where we couldn't do that, we dropped in, some dividers and things like that. And what was really interesting to look at that in hindsight is our overall safety performance improved and our overall productivity actually improved. And so we've seen some things like spacing that we actually think probably make sense permanently, not just temporarily. And there have been quite a few benefits, I think, that have come out of this time period that way. The other big thing that I think served us well is our culture is really designed to be built around a shared leadership approach. So we really think a lot about dispersing power, not collecting it, viewing everybody as a leader, giving everybody a voice. And that fits the virus management mode super well, because when you ask the simple question, who has to help lead with respect to mitigating a virus, the answer is everybody. It takes every single person in a company, a community, a state, or a nation to commit to making smart choices. And our culture was set up pretty well for that. Two quick things I'd mention in closing was, one, we did go down to what we considered to be essential business activity. And I was quite amazed at how much stuff we cut out that I'm not sure we really need to put back in to our activity. We cut our travel way back, and we didn't seem to lose a beat. And then finally, I would like to say that as much as this is a super difficult time for everybody, I think in the long run, there may be some trends that bode well for Maine. I think if you can live anywhere and work remotely or in small teams, that Maine may end up being a real beneficiary of that in the long run. So we've been lucky, we've been fortunate. So far, so good. We've worked the whole time, and we've been busy. Our entire industry has stayed together, and we've kept busy. So thank you.
Kevin, thank you so much. We're now going to turn to Don Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Jim. I'm honored to be here and get to share the stage again with Kevin. Actually, I know today it's a screen. Kevin, you didn't get to mention your recently published book, so hopefully you can get a plug in for that. And also happy to join Josh and all the wonderful things he's done with Tilson. As I hope many of you know, at Seabags, we design, manufacture, and sell totes and accessories made out of recycled sales. We sell them through our website, through our retail stores, as well as to wholesale to other retailers. And we make everything right here where I'm sitting, either in Portland or South Portland. When I was thinking about today's topic, what came to mind is how we all tend to remember where we were and when major events occurred. So for me, COVID-19 became real on March 12th. Sounds like about a week after Kevin. I was at a board meeting in New Hampshire as things started to unfold very quickly. And that day I remember writing the first of many emails. This one was to our employees, just reassuring them and sharing what I knew at the time. And what I didn't know is that would be the first of so many communications to all of our various stakeholders over the coming months. And for us as a small company, from that moment on, what we've been focused on is, quite frankly, survival, because this has had a big impact on us. One of the first things we did was start building up cash. We started by calling our bank and drawing down our line of credit. I later heard that we were a bit ahead of the curve on that one. And then we immediately began examining all of our spending and expenses. The following week, when Portland announced their shelter-in-place order, was when we quickly shifted to making masks as a way to help out and also to become an essential business. And then over the course of the next 2 months, we produced over 28,000 masks and sold the majority of them at cost. For us, it wasn't a big shift. We're a cut and sew operation. It's what we do. We cut sales and we make them into totes. For us, we just had to source the cotton material because recycled sales don't make very good masks. We had to source the cotton material and shift to making masks, which we did pretty quickly. Again, another operation that we couldn't send people home to do. Of those 28,000 masks, we sold 25,000 of them in bulk orders to 22 organizations across the state, including both the city of Portland and the state. And we sold those at cost. We did make some donations, about 800 to Maine veterans homes, 75 State Street, an assisted living facility here in Portland, as well as others. After a few weeks, we were getting requests for our masks from customers who were trying to find them. They would email us or reach out on social media looking to buy them. So once we had ramped up production, we made them available online. But one of the things we wanted to do was also be able to sell them at cost to frontline workers. So we wrote some copy. In the description, we said, if you would like a 30% discount, which basically took them back to cost, then on the honor system, you can use this code, and we put it right in the copy. We had over 400 customers buying 2,500 masks, and less than 20% of them used the honor system code. And the inspiration was from that, and all of us Mainers will appreciate this. It was the roadside stands that we all see and we frequent that have a box out to put your money in for the firewood or the corn or the pie. That's my favorite. So in terms of the impact, during these first few weeks, we went from 140 employees to 62 employees. Like Hancock Lumber, we gave people choice. And the first choice was whether people wanted to be laid off voluntarily. We also were able to send most of our salaried people home to work remotely if their jobs allowed it. So 25 of those 62 that remained were actually working from home. In a period of weeks, we went from having 15 stores open with another 17 ready to go, either because they were seasonal or new stores and open for the first time across 13 different states. We closed our stores state by state as we followed the lockdown orders and the unemployment laws by state. And one of the things we were making sure of was that the waiting period to apply and receive unemployment had been waived before we eliminated any positions and laid off our retail staff. And we did that to ensure that nobody who was laid off was negatively affected financially. In fact, as you are probably aware, anybody who earns less than $1,000 a week actually has made out more on unemployment. I'm happy to say that within a couple of weeks, we were able to call people back. And as of this week, we are at almost full strength with more than 90% of our people back. By next week, all of our stores will be open, but unfortunately, our sales are well behind last year. We're off to a great start of the year. We had a really good first quarter. The last couple of weeks of March were kind of tough, but April was our first month in the history of the company where we had down sales. We were down 13% from last year. And in May, it got worse. We were down 32% from last year. June is looking more promising. One of the reasons those numbers are so stark is over half of our sales come from our retail stores. In the months of April and May, it's only about 40%. But when you put a zero in, it's really tough to make that up. And our wholesale business, because we sell to other small retailers primarily, was also hurt. The good news is our online business responded. We were up more than 120% in the month of April and about 80% in the month of May. So just a short story, because one of the things we're asked to address is lessons learned. So one of the lessons learned through this, in addition to shifting our manufacturing to making masks, was on the marketing and the product side. It was about less than 2 weeks before Easter. Our stores were loaded with our Easter buckets, and online they were selling quite well. And one morning as I came into work, my CFO made a comment to me to the effect of, gee, it's too bad we couldn't put a chocolate Easter bunny in our buckets to make it easier for customers to have the Easter bunny come to their house or to send it as a gift. I thought, what an interesting idea. Well, within a day, we were on the phone to Wilbur's of Maine up in Freeport, a chocolatier, asking if they could be a part of this. The next day, we had shot the product. We had it up on our website, but we didn't know what to expect. So we bought 50 packages of chocolate candy to put in the buckets and to sell the customers, with a promise that if it did well, that they could chase it and help to fulfill. We like this for two reasons. One, we saw this as solving a customer problem of not being able to go out shopping, not being able to visit your grandchildren to send them their Easter gift. And so we tried to make that easy. And number two, there are a lot of small businesses that are hurting, and we thought, shop local, maybe we can help a small business. So it was great to have Andy come down, deliver the chocolates, and we didn't know what to expect. Well, in the next 10 days, we sold 741 of what we called our Easter Bunny gift bucket. We shipped to 43 states, from Alabama to Arkansas, Alaska to Arizona. And we only had 2 reports of melted chocolates from customers. During this time, we also debuted our curbside pickup window, which we initially did just to pick up masks, but later for customers picking up product. Since then, we've launched a number of what we call these problem-solving gift bundles for Mother's Day, Father's Day, pets, baby, and it's not too late to buy for Father's Day. There's a bunch more lessons I could share, but I see my time is about up, so I'll send it back to Tommy and talk to y'all later.
Don, thank you so much. And just for the benefit of our audience, we have Don's background was real. It was not an artificial background. In addition to being CEO, he's an extraordinary designer. So you'll have a look at that as we continue. Now we are pleased to have before us Josh Broder of Tilson.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And thanks for having me here, Jim. Tilson is on a mission to build America's information infrastructure. And because of this, we have team members that are tower climbers, technicians that work in bucket trucks, network engineers, software developers, business system implementers, consultants, project managers. And so we really have a mix of blue and white collar workers. And one of the things that's characterized this national emergency has been really different outcomes for people who are working out in the field with their hands and people who are working from home. And we had the interesting mix in our business of having both. When we first heard of the emergency, we emptied our offices, and I think we moved faster than many companies because we had exposure all over the country. If you'll remember back to the early days of the pandemic, we had an outbreak in Seattle, and we have people on the ground in Seattle. And so that got us thinking very early in this process that we had to get people out of our offices as quickly as possible and put our team safety first. So we had about 600 people that we emptied out of more than 20 locations around the country, including here in Maine. And at a personal level with school-age kids, I found that I had to work at home. The new definition of a non-essential worker is a CEO. And if I didn't have a background up here, you'd see my recently installed Hancock lumber door in my office, which didn't have a door since I have a couple of young kids and a very assertive dog. So in a sort of another sense of Maine small business interconnectivity here from one business to another, I had just gifted my senior management team some Press Hotel sea bags with gift certificates to stay at the Press Hotel because we were just running really too fast, and I was hoping that they could take a little break. And I got those into their hands just in time for the pandemic to hit it and not be able to use quite yet. The virus did impact us directly. We went into a very strict lockdown posture in the company. We socially isolated to our work and home group. So for our white collar employees, they work from home, which is a very similar experience to many are having here. And for our outside employees, they continue to work as essential workers, building and maintaining the internet, which connected us through this process. But they isolated to their work groups, meaning that if they were in a team of 3 or 4, they only had contact with their family and with that group. And this was a pretty extreme lockdown posture we took that we think was more restrictive than many of the people that work in our industries and really anywhere. And so we made it through most of the worst of the pandemic without an infection until recently. We had one employee get sick at one of our out-of-state offices and thankfully recovered. And so the thing we couldn't control for was that many people had spouses or other family members in their home groups that were themselves essential workers and out in the world. And so what we found was that our subcontractors, we have people who do our work and people who we subcontract our work to all over the country, and our subcontractors who didn't institute stricter lockdown policies were really badly affected. We had quite a few subcontractor infections. And based on potential exposures, we had dozens of people impacted and still do today around the country on quarantine and trace back work. In most cases, our self-imposed restrictions were more restrictive than what was imposed by civil authorities. And where we had the most difficulty was when there was a dissonance or disconnect between the impositions we put on our own team members to keep them safe corporately and what their local civil authorities were asking people to do. So in places like Portland, where they had a very strict lockdown order and also clear guidance on who were essential workers, it was kind of harmonious. But as you can imagine, in our Atlanta office, which had an early reopening, at the same time we were asking people to isolate themselves, their home and work groups, there was some dissonance between having things open and what we were asking our team members to do. What I want to emphasize here, because we have exposure broadly nationally, is that things could have been worse in Maine. In many of the markets that we operate in, the virus itself was much more severe. There were many more sick people, and the disruptions, not just by civil orders, but the actual infection and the real fear of infection was much more pronounced. One of our busiest offices is in New Jersey, just across the river from Manhattan, and there wasn't an employee in that office that didn't lose a loved one. We had 3 or 4 people in our Portland, Maine office lose people they knew here in Maine or elsewhere, but that experience of losing a grandparent or a parent was much more common across the country. And one of the things we found ourselves wrestling with was people who would normally take a couple of weeks of bereavement and go to a funeral and start their grieving process were stuck at home with no funeral and just saying they wanted to keep working. And so, the social implications of the pandemic were, I think, really unexpected for us. I'll read you an email that I wrote to my workforce vice president. And I went back and looked at this as I was sort of reflecting back on the pandemic. And I looked at the date, February 21st, 2020. I think my last travel was March 3rd. I think we shut the doors in all our offices on March 15th. And, most places went into lockdown a week or two after that. And so here was my note to my vice president of workforce. Hi, Adria. And reading the news tonight, it looks like COVID-19 parentheses novel coronavirus, right? This is like back when we had to explain these terms, have broken out in a significant way in Iran. And there's evidence that it left Iran to other countries, including Canada, before they shut down air travel today. I think this likely will become widespread. Please develop a contingency plan for how we can best safeguard our team and also continue business operations during such an outbreak. I'm not eager to take any safety risk with our people on this. And it is still clear that communications networks functioning will be an important part of any mitigation response and the social distance required to ride out any protracted outbreak. If we don't take any control measures in a company our size, we could expect 12 to 24 deaths with 2 times that number of dependents. So here are our priorities in order: employee safety, managing employee independent casualties in healthcare, continue the business operations and keep Tilson's business healthy, and then support our clients and communities as part of the national response, which will be important for maintaining social distance. Please keep preparation quiet. I don't want to create unnecessary panic. So this was my reflection in mid to late February on what might happen. And I couldn't be more grateful that we didn't have the kind of casualty impacts that we expected. But I think some of that is in direct response and not just the control measures we took, but the control measures that communities that hosted us took as well. And so as we move forward, we're looking at how do we protect our teams. And now we're starting to think about how we just operationalize this kind of contact tracing and quarantine work and aggressive testing in our normal course. And what we're telling our employees is an acronym that we made up for this is to be smart. And be smart, S-M-A-R-T, stands for social distance outside your work and wear a mask. That's the SMA. Continue to do good reporting of exposures and illnesses. That's the R. And when in doubt, test. Be smart. And what we found is that's been an effective strategy as we've been dealing with our people out in the world in areas where the infection is really roaring. About half of the markets that we work in have increasing case counts, and in other places where we work, the case counts are actually improving. And so, as I sort of wrap up my opening remarks here, I would say that the thing that was sort of most eye-opening on our team was being a mission-driven organization was really important going through this process. Our tagline is on a mission, and externally, that means that we're on a mission to build America's information infrastructure, which, the mission itself was so obvious and urgent in, keeping the economy running and connecting essential workers and first responders. But internally, our mission is in building a team that takes care of each other. And in this case, putting our safety first and really taking the threat seriously, I think, mitigated what could have been a much worse situation. As we get into the Q&A, I'd love the opportunity to talk a little bit about the kind of communication that we had to shift to on our team. But, ultimately, externally, our mission was to keep communications going with everybody else. And internally, we really had to change the way we communicated with our team members and operate in a very different way.
Josh, thank you so much. I've had the opportunity to work with Josh over many years. And for those of you who are not as familiar with Tilson, they do build communication networks around the country. Josh also serves as co-chair of the Governor's Economic Recovery Committee. So I think as we turn now to the Q&A portion of our program, let me just start with an initial open-ended question. What was the biggest aha moment of the pandemic for you and your businesses?
Well, there were a lot of them, but I would say at hindsight, really focusing on business, the biggest aha was we were probably engaging in a lot of activity that we thought was essential that actually really probably wasn't. There was a lot of motion in our business, a tremendous amount of moving of people between sites, with customers, lots of travel. And I think we've realized that while some of that is, of course, super important, that we were running around a lot. I think maybe not just as a company, but as a society, we were running around a lot in a way that maybe with the technology we have today is not really essential. That's kind of been the forward looking for me.
Great.
So I'll jump in. I think the biggest was the example that I used about the Easter Bunny buckets that we offered. And so another one that I would share is a story about how we were trying to keep employees safe, how we created a second entrance. As employees started to come back, we were worried about people crossing and being in too close a proximity. So we were creating separate entrances, and one of the things that we did was we shifted and created an entrance to our second floor for our second floor employees, which sounded like a great idea. And when I went up a couple days later and was checking in with people and asked them how it went, and they said, well, it's great. And I said, well, but what? Well, but we still have to go down to the first floor to punch into the time clock when we get in after coming in the back entrance. And at the end of the day, we have to go back down and then back upstairs. So it wasn't as elegant a solution as I thought. And I said, oh, I didn't realize that. What can we do? It was a simple request. They said, could we have a time clock upstairs as well as one downstairs? That was an easy fix. And it was a great example of just listening to what people's needs are, listening to their ideas, and our employees were the ones that had the idea. We were able to put that in place, and it just made things easy, and it was a fast and quick solution. So it was more just about a reinforcing than aha, about the importance of listening to people that are doing the jobs, because oftentimes they're the ones that know best.
Great, thank you.
So for me, I think it was, the effectiveness of remote work. And so, we've always had lots of people that are remote workers. We, have something like offices in 20 states, but employees in 42 states. So having people remote was always part of our business. That being said, we had certain areas like in CAD drafting or software development or other specialties where people were habitually working as teams, where we didn't think that we'd be as efficient working remotely. And we weren't at first, but after we sent everybody, 3 monitors to put on their work from home desks, and people learned how to work well in that environment, our efficiency picked up. And I think looking back on it now, we can never say again, realistically, working from home is not possible. I think in some cases it's still not optimal, but as a viable option, we've seen that, like in any other major social transformation, workforces are trainable, they can adapt. And, in this case, they adapted in weeks and not years. And so it actually caused me to rethink and maybe raise my expectations about, what kind of adaptation we can absorb over what time frame in the future.
Great, thank you. Maybe a related question as we talk about employees and working remotely. Have you faced any challenges with regard to your corporate culture, and are there steps that you've taken or found effective in helping to maintain or even improve corporate culture?
So maybe I'll start on that one. For us, we think we're on borrowed time a little bit on the organic relationships that happen and evolve when people work together. And so we've worked hard to recreate some of those more organic moments where people can connect and talk about things that are not a scheduled meeting, operational things. But that's very, very challenging. And so we're surfing on some of the long-term successful interpersonal relationships that have been built in the company over time. And, we will have to come up with new strategies on how to refresh those relationships. And if this becomes a protracted situation, which, I think this book hasn't been written yet on what's going to happen with the virus, it might, we'll have to really be thoughtful and figure that out.
Just building on what Josh just said and reinforcing it. So our situation, you might recall, we were all working on site 100% every day. And what I saw in that and heard was a couple things, but the big one was that people really appreciated the human contact, the understanding that I'm not alone in this, and the normalcy that coming together at work provided. I think people have appreciated work actually in a way that they might not have stopped and thought of before. The ability to come to work, the ability to belong to a team, the ability to have connectivity, all of those things that Josh spoke about.
Yeah, I would echo that and say that for us, it's been a challenge because we're a small company. I think we have a tight culture. Everybody's based right here, as I said, in either Portland or South Portland. Our remote workers have really been our folks out at our retail stores. So we've had that relationship with them, but they're doing their jobs in our stores. So that's their place. And so we had some experience in communicating with them. But what I would say is what we've experienced over the last couple of months is it's more challenging. It's not as productive for most people because our work is a collaborative work. And while there are plenty of online collaborative tools and we're all quite experienced at Zooming and various technologies, it is quite frankly, in my opinion, not as efficient. What can happen in a quick conversation when you stop by somebody's desk or you chat with them takes scheduling meetings, can take 2 or 3 or 4 emails. And so it has been taxing. And so as we brought people back, it's part for us of re-engaging and rebuilding that culture and knowing that some people won't come back for some time. Because we do have folks that either because their jobs allow it and they work more independently, a couple of folks that can work remotely, or they have a compromised immune system and are at risk. So we're continuing to have those people work remotely. So we're kind of still in transition in between, but I certainly look forward to the day when we can all be in one place again, when I can walk down and pop in people's offices and talk to them, when people can chat across the room. It's just quite frankly for us and our business more effective than a remote work situation.
Josh, you mentioned the phrase borrowed time a moment ago, which was interesting to me. One of my observations is Zoom calls and so forth are effective for maintaining relationships that one already has, but not so good if you're trying to develop new relationships. Any observations about how one navigates developing new relationships in this pandemic world?
Yeah, this has been a real challenge for us and an opportunity. And so on one hand, we have now a 2-dimensional interpersonal relationship dynamic here. On the other hand, we've never had as much FaceTime with each other. Kudos to Apple for grabbing the trade name FaceTime. Right now, what we found is that transactions that would have been a passing email, or might have been, that terrible thread of email that goes on for days, are now quick 15-minute face-to-face conversations. And what I've noticed is my phone never rings anymore. People go to video. Once they've had the experience of having the sort of emotional feedback that comes with a face-to-face conversation, even virtual, never want to go back to what now seems like a very thin dimension of audio only. So I think on a go-forward basis, that face-to-face interaction where we were already naturally spread over distance is much more effective, but of course it's not as good as the interpersonal relationship that develops over video. And to put an anecdote to that, we were engaged in a process to potentially acquire a company in another market, and the deal just kind of fell apart. And it fell apart, I think, because ultimately we didn't trust each other. And I think one of the reasons we didn't trust each other is because normally the way that works is you go sit and workshop it for a couple of days and have dinner together and maybe share a beer, and none of that could happen in this case. And so only having a sterile business relationship was a terrible baseline on which to try and build a deal based on trust with.
Any other thoughts or comments on that? So let me transition a little bit. I think, Kevin, early on in your remarks, you said one of the first things that you and your business confronted was whether you could legally open and you determined that you were an essential business. As lawyers, myself and others in my firm regularly hear from businesses wanting to know, can I reopen? How do I reopen? What are the risks? Can you talk, and any of the panelists, about how you may have confronted the challenges and risks of actually being open for business in this pandemic world, and the risk or fear that either customers or employees might have issues, how you went about trying to mitigate risks, and any advice you might have for others?
Yeah, such a great question. And I think about it on a couple levels. On one level, it was really simple. I think that this is where free markets and capitalism really work. People have a choice about working or not working. Customers have a choice about buying or not buying. And I really wanted to just let that flow. I was prepared for all possibilities and wanted to be able almost have the company be a conduit for what those human beings wanted to do, not a workforce and customers, but humans, what they wanted to do, and let that form organically. And taking that approach took all the pressure off. It was really about listening and following at that point. But then the other side of it was, which was a bit tricky at time, was the political and social implications. So when you're talking about, this is obvious, but when you're talking about health and a virus that has the potential to be deadly, it's really difficult in some respects to have open dialogue. Like, I constantly felt that it was super important to be safe, but that Maine could probably move quicker and still be safe. But how do you say that without feeling like, or being perceived as if, you're prioritizing economics over wellness, which never entered my thinking at all. My thinking about wanting to reopen more quicker was for the overall health and wellness of people, not to put it at risk. And I'll end just with on this note, one of my favorite business authors is Jim Collins. And my favorite thought of his is what he talks about is the power of the A&E versus the tyranny of the or. And I've thought a lot about this in this situation. How you frame a topic has a huge impact on its outcome. So if one said we can work or be safe, that's going to lead to one set of choices. If someone conversely said we can work and be safe, that leads to another completely different set of choices. And anyway, my big point is in a really difficult social topic like this, it's maintaining a culture where open communication about all possibilities can flow, because you only get the best ideas and the best outcomes when you get all the ideas authentically out on the table.
If I can piggyback on that, I couldn't agree more with Kevin's comments, particularly about choice for customers, choice for employees. And I wish we had been in that situation and been able to stay open. So it was pretty scary for us when we were under risk of being closed completely. So the first thing we did as we started making masses, we called the city of Portland to let them know what we were doing so that we could make sure that they were supportive. And they were, but our employees were afraid to come to work. They were afraid to be out on the street. They were afraid that they would be stopped. So one of the things I had to do was to write a letter for all of our employees that they could have in their possession in case they got stopped on their way to work, saying that they work in an essential business and they can come to work. And then when the state issued their lockdowns, we went through the same process to get a letter from the state from Commissioner Johnson qualifying us as an essential business so we could stay open. And it wasn't for our customers' benefit at that point because all of our stores were closed rather, but our manufacturing operations were open. So that allowed us to keep our manufacturing operations open. And now with the gradual reopening of stores within the state, we've complied with all of the regulations. We have the signs posted, and our customers, I believe, are exercising their choice, as Kevin says, to come in if they feel safe. And our stores in general are open, they're spacious, they tend not to be crowded. And customers can see in. We're on main streets from Booth Bay to Bar Harbor and Rockland and Freeport. So it's pretty inviting, with the exception of Portland, which tended to be a smaller, more crowded spot. So we did reconfigure Portland. We expanded the space, we put up a wall, we moved the register to the back. So we made some specific steps so that where customers were to come in, or hopefully when they do come in, they'll feel more comfortable and safer. And again, but at the end of the day, in the final analysis, it's now their choice. Whereas for a couple months, it wasn't their choice. They didn't have a choice to come to our stores, and we didn't have the choice to be open.
Thank you. So in hearing the responses, I'm also hearing about how businesses need to navigate the reopening requirements. And we've had Commissioner Johnson join us on past eggs and issues, talking about the approach the state has made. And the state is working very hard to try to figure out how best to safely reopen. Josh, you also have a unique perspective as co-chair of the Governor's Economic Recovery Committee. Do any of you have thoughts or comments about sort of this new normal of checklists and operational direction? And do you have any thoughts or suggestions about where we should move next?
Yeah, so I can comment on that from a couple of different directions. In my role as CEO of Tilson, as I mentioned in my comments earlier, having to operationalize coexisting with the virus is something that we've already had to do. And so if you're a junior employee at Tilson, you've heard of contact tracing, quarantine, and maybe been directed to get yourself tested. And in some cases, our professional safety staff, which would normally be in the business of making sure people don't fall off of towers or get in car accidents, are making sure that people have access to private testing if they don't meet the criteria in a given jurisdiction for getting testing. And so that's just part of doing work, and that sort of segues into my work in the Economic Recovery Committee. And so the first piece of the Economic Recovery Committee is as it is titled, focused on the economic recovery. And so if you look at the composition of the committee, it's Mainers from all of the different sectors of our economy, and there's nobody on the team there from public health. So we don't address issues of reopening. Our job is to plan in parallel so that when we are open, we can have a jump start on figuring out what the strategy is to stabilize and support our various sectors and get back on track for growth. And so within Maine, I get a lot of commentary about people's opinion about the reopening plan, which we are watching with great interest, but we recognize that our work essentially begins where the DECD and the Maine CDC's work ends on the reopening process. That being said, regardless of when the reopening happens in any given sector, whether it's tomorrow or weeks or months from now, the necessity to coexist with the virus and run our businesses safely and safeguard our employees is real. And the feelings and behavior of consumers, whether they're tourists or someone walking into a retail store, is also real. And so developing business capacity to do things like testing and contact tracing and quarantine and communication and good hygiene practices is sort of a necessary thing we have to figure out within the business community, regardless of sort of what happens from a civil authority standpoint. And that's something that, I'm hopeful on the recovery committee that we can come up with some strategies on how to provide that, support once businesses have to really coexist with this and be both open and safe.
Great, thank you.
Jim, I think this is such a great question you asked. We had a unique opportunity at our company as an essential business to write our own rules. So before municipalities and states started writing rules, we were still open. So we got to write our own rules. And that was a really powerful exercise because we know our business, we know our industry, and we were not having something done to us. We were writing our own rules that we knew were going to make sense. So if I had one thought for handling a situation like this in the future, it's this. I'm just a big believer in trust in localized leadership, trust in people on a local level. I think, barbers know how to make barbershops safe. Golf course managers know how to make golf courses safe. And I don't think, try as anyone may, you can centrally write rules that are as effective or agile as people can do on a local level. And the other big problem when it's not done on a local level is people don't have ownership of it. So this went from being something we created that we own to something that gets sent to you, and now you're following lists. And I really think at the state and federal level, the opportunity is to stay strategic, to trust people locally, and to stay strategic on this subject with big picture issues like testing, or long-term, 5 or 10 years from now, how does COVID-19 impact Maine? In what ways, again, when you can work from anywhere, does Maine actually potentially become a winner?
And if I can just chime in, I have no concerns about our ability to open and follow the guidelines in our retail stores, and we've done that. My concerns are more about, the work of Josh's committee and how hard we're going to make that job. So the longer that we have restrictions and the rules that Kevin talked about that keep people from coming to our state, that keep people from spending money in our state, the harder the job of the recovery committee is going to be, because summer is upon us. We do half of our sales in July and August. And I know many Maine businesses that do a larger percentage of their sales in July and August. And many of those businesses, and not unlike us, make the majority of their profits in those months. And if our sales are down by half or some, large number, it's going to be really, really hard for most companies. And as we all know, some won't survive. So that job of the Economic Recovery Committee will be that much harder. So, I'll just say it plainly, we need our visitors from out of state that are going to practice safe habits and bring their money to Maine for the sake of the restaurants and the lodging institutions primarily. But if those people are here, then they'll spend money on other services, they'll spend money at retail. And if not, then it's going to be a really tough summer for everybody. And it's going to be, I think, a really rough recovery.
Don, Kevin, Josh, thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Your comments were extraordinarily thoughtful. Your businesses are very important to the state of Maine. We appreciate all you do. And on behalf of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce, we look forward to continuing to work with you. This was a great discussion. Thank you so much. We look to continue to navigate this pandemic, and we hope this pandemic ends as soon as possible. So we'll conclude momentarily, but before I do, I want to remind our loyal audience about a few upcoming Chamber events. Today, the Chamber will be hosting a Distance Saves Lives blood drive in partnership with the American Red Cross and Maine Health. Join us in helping to make our community stronger during this challenging time. And to schedule appointments, please visit www.redcrossblood.org. This Thursday, June 11th, the Chamber is hosting the State of Maine from Lockdown to Lobsters with People's United Bank. And next week is the final Kegs and Issues of the season with Rob Todd from Allagash Brewing Company. Don't forget to sign up today. To view a complete list of all the Chamber's upcoming events, please visit our website to subscribe to the Chamber newsletter, and be sure to follow the Chamber across all social media platforms. Thank you, be well, and we look forward to seeing you next season for Eggs and Issues in September. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.